Why aren't there more people, young people, why aren't they millionaires at this point?
I think it's as simple as this. Most young guys I know between 18 to 25, they wake up, grab their phone first thing, they scroll on TikTok for 20 minutes, then they get out of bed. They probably watch porn every day, probably jack off every day, probably don't meditate, they probably don't work out as much as they should, probably don't read as many books as they could. Overall, there's just this sense of lack of discipline.